On Wednesday, Prime Minister Harper heads to Washington, where he and U.S. President Barack Obama will sign a new trade and security perimeter deal, one that will have significant implications potentially for both countries. The leading cabinet member on this is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, John Baird. Mr. Baird, will this agreement be focusing mainly on security, that is, on people going back and forth, or on trade, in other words, goods going back and forth?
I think it's all about jobs and the economy. That's been the real focus of our efforts with the United States. You know, we see far too often the border is thickening, and that really puts Canadian companies at competitive disadvantage. So it's about making the Canadian economy more competitive and secure.
Yeah, but what are we going to do then to make changes that are going to resolve those kind of problems, or at least alleviate them?
Yeah. Well, let me give you some of the examples of some of the problems we have. When you have a cargo arriving on the west coast to a Canadian port in British Columbia, it's got to be inspected by customs there, and then when it goes over the border to the United States in Minnesota. That makes it a lot more expensive. It clogs and makes a more congested rail system. So we've got to tackle some of these problems. You know, right now when you travel, if I travel from Ottawa to New York and then go on to Atlanta, I got to go get my baggage again in New York and get it rescreened. So we've got to stop this duplication and make it easier for people and better for the economy.
So that sounds to me like we're talking about harmonizing regulations on both sides of the border so that we don't have to redo things again.
Or in a case that is the Canadian inspection at that cargo ship, is that good enough for the container so it doesn't have to go twice? Or if my luggage can be checked in Ottawa, does it need to be checked a second time? So that's what a lot of it is about.
Now, some of this, of course, does involve a sacrifice of sovereignty. I'm not running away from that totally. I mean, I know in Europe the EU had to give up a lot of sovereignty in order for the sake of trade. How much sovereignty are we going to be looking at having to sacrifice? Is that going to be a big debate?
I think Canada's going to maintain all of its sovereign rights, but how do we be smart and have a better approach to tackling some of these problems? The United States is going to have to make some concessions. Canada's going to, but I think in the end, it's going to make Canada stronger. Anything we can do to strengthen the Canadian economy strengthens Canada, makes more jobs, more opportunity, makes our economy more competitive. Mm-hmm. And I think that'll be a bit of a red herring.
The Privacy Commissioner is worried, and she said this publicly, about different privacy regulations in Canada and in the United States, and she's worried that Canadians might have to sacrifice too much of their privacy to American officials.
We've consulted the Privacy Commissioner 2 or 3 times throughout this process, and we'll obviously want to continue to work with her. Mm-hmm. She does good work. We've worked with her in the past, and she's given good counsel, good advice, and we'll want to ensure that the Canadians' privacy is respected. But when you go across the border now, you have to give them your name, your address, your passport. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about a lot of personal information beyond that.
On the bigger picture here, to what degree are we watching a deterioration, a souring, maybe is a better word, in U.S.-Canada relations that might be not just temporary, but something fundamental happening in the relationship between the two countries?
Yeah, I just don't accept that. Prime Minister Harper and President Obama have a good relationship. They've been working, the Prime Minister, this team who's been working with the Obama administration has been reporting directly to the Prime Minister. He's been very involved in this. And when they meet in Washington later this week, I think they'll be able to talk about a lot of success and a big step forward for the relationship. It's not an easy one, but I enjoy pretty good relations with my counterpart. Most of my colleagues do. Yeah. I know the Prime Minister and the President have a good relationship.
But the Prime Minister did suggest the other day, on Thursday I think it was, that Canada should not be too dependent, should not get locked in, have its energy locked into being only a supplier to the United States. That suggests to me that we're saying the Americans are not as dependable a partner on trade as they used to be. And a lot of people would agree with that.
Oh, trade, since the Free Trade Agreement came in 20 years ago, we've seen a huge increase in Canada-U.S. trade. That's good for both countries. I think it only makes sense. You want to have, if you're a store, you want to have more than one customer. That makes just good common sense. Because obviously the United States is having some real economic challenges. The economy and job creation is much stronger in Canada than it's been in the United States. So it makes sense that we diversify our markets with the Asia-Pacific region, with Europe, with the Americas, and that's something that we've been working hard on.